So today's case is super gruesome, and I want to just put that disclaimer out there at the very beginning that the contents of this case are just as disturbing as the others. However, there is mention of cannibalism and necrophilia, and so if that's too much, please don't watch this episode. Tanya Teresa Begay was a citizen of the Navajo Nation. She apparently was from the Gallup, New Mexico region. It was a little difficult for me to find information about her. A part of this work that we're doing is to highlight the stories of the victims, tell who they are. I had a hard time finding information about her clans or where her family was originally from, but according to the documentation that I did discover, she was born December 20th, 1980. She was 36 years old when she disappeared, and she would have been 45 years old today. The details of her disappearance are as follows. She was last seen leaving her aunt's house in Tohatchee, New Mexico on March 3rd, 2017. She was en route from Loop, Arizona to her family's home in Gallup. Along the way, she stopped at her aunt's home. After visiting, she left with her boyfriend and was never heard from again. The vehicle she was driving was her aunt's. It was a 2004 Dodge Neon with a New Mexico license plate, and it was later found abandoned. The boyfriend was Jason Thornburg. He was questioned by police and then released. According to the family of Tanya, he had a history of domestic violence dating back to 2014. Days prior to her disappearance, Mr. Thornburg he allegedly assaulted her with a glass coffee pot. She filed charges against him, but they were later dropped after she went missing because she was unavailable to testify. In December 2021, 9 months after Tanya's disappearance, Jason was charged with capital murder in the deaths of 3 individuals. Their bodies were dismembered and their burned remains were found in a dumpster in Fort Worth, Texas. At his trial, he used a defense of insanity. In November 2024, he was convicted, and in the following month, he was sentenced to death by the state. After his arrest for the 3 murders, Thornburg confessed to killing Begay, and he also confessed to the murder of his roommate, Mark Jewell, who was 61, who was found dead in a house fire in May 2021. Thornburg allegedly told detectives that he killed and dismembered the 3 people in the name of God and believed that the Bible called him to commit human sacrifices. For the murder of Begay, Thornburg was formally indicted by the Arizona state authorities for 1 count of first-degree murder, 1 count of assault with intent to commit murder, and 1 count of assault resulting in injury. The case remains open for investigation as of 2022. From what I found online, it's still unknown where her body, it's hard to say.
They haven't found her remains?
Yeah. They don't. So some people, they suspect that it might still be in the Tohatchee area, but also it might be in Albuquerque, Gallup, or even Dilcon. So it's a widespread region, as you know, as we know. But her family states that, she was pretty well connected to the family. She was a mother and left behind 2 children. And her sister, who's been kind of the face in the media, said they still don't have closure after the sentencing because her body was never found. The quote that she was attributed to her was, "We still need to bring her home. We never had a funeral. We don't know where she's at. Until then, there won't be justice or closure." So, in looking into who committed these crimes, I did some digging on who Jason Allen Thornburg was. He's also known as the Tarrant County serial killer. He is a member of the Navajo Nation from the Dilcon, Arizona area. His date of birth, August 1980. This is all public record. It's actually August 27th, 1980, which freaks me out because that means he's a Virgo. The relationship to the victim is, at the time of her disappearance, they were dating. So he was her boyfriend. So a little bit about what crimes he committed. According to the arrest warrant, Thornburg knew and met the victims at the Mid City Inn in Euless, I believe that's how it's pronounced. And he confessed his involvement in their deaths. He also went into intimate details about how he went about that, according to the warrant. Okay, so without going into graphic detail about what he did to the victims in Fort Worth, I can kind of give a quick overview. So he was staying at a motel, and he was staying with a male individual. I believe his name is David Luetis, 42 years old. They were sharing a room. He attacked David and basically chopped up his body, and he saved the parts in a storage bin. A few days later, he encountered two women, Lauren Phillips, 34, and Maricruz Reyes Mathis, 33, and he also attacked them, um, dismembered them, kept their bodies in a storage bin, or their body parts in a storage bin. In the court documents, he goes into like explicit detail about what he did to their bodies and how he ended their lives. It is pretty graphic, and so that's why I want to leave it out. There was descriptions of cannibalism and necrophilia, and in the trial, he stated that he had been called to commit these human sacrifices. There's witness account of him like immersed in the Bible, and he believed that his understanding of the Bible was for him to commit these crimes in the name of God. So during the trial, that was explored. On December 4th, 2024, a jury convicted Jason Thornburg of capital murder for the September 2021 killings, rejecting an argument from Thornburg's attorneys that he should not be found guilty by reason of insanity. The closing arguments in the punishment phase of the trial began after 14 days of testimony in the Criminal District Court number 3, or in Criminal District Court number 3 in Tarrant County. During the sentencing, there's video of this online, but he is sitting there in the courtroom. He grew out his hair. He's in a suit, and he sat still. He didn't show any emotion or reaction as he was sentenced to death. The family came up and they testified, and they read their witness statements, the impact statements, and the whole time he just sat there expressionless.
I think one thing to kind of explain, I think, from my years of listening to true crime is that like with the insanity plea, I think it's like really specific that the person can't know what they did was wrong. Like it wasn't a
Mm-hmm.
wrong act. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and I think they go through different ways to figure out whether or not they did wrong. Like hiding the fact that they
Mm-hmm.
did this, covering it up. um, trying to avoid punishment, knowing that the act you committed was wrong, whether or not you had these beliefs or these delusions,
Mhm.
knowing that the act you were doing was illegal or something to be punished. That I think that's where they draw the line of
Yeah.
insanity.
Mhm. And there was irrationality involved. Like the body parts he set on fire were outside the motel. He threw them in a dumpster and lit it on fire. And then, of course, people saw it and reported it. And then it was discovered that there were human remains in there in the bin. And so he was apprehended. When he was questioned, he confessed. He said he didn't, he didn't lie about it or put up a fight. He confessed and said, yes, this is what I did. He then also confessed to killing his roommate and Tanya. And he said they too were also human sacrifices. Um, and in the process of the court hearing, what I was gonna say before was that, like, during the sentencing, the jury, they were in tears. They were wiping their eyes because um, it was it was really brutal, and the prosecutor called him a psychopath, said he's evil. His own attorneys called him a serial killer and a cannibal, but they argued that his behavior was because he suffered from partial fetal alcohol syndrome as a result of his mother drinking and utilizing. I guess she had a drug addiction when she was pregnant with him. The judge had also issued psychological evaluations to support, like, I guess, to see if these findings were accurate. And so they stated that his mental responsibility had been affected by those factors. His attorneys, they added that Thornburg had been deluded into thinking that he rightly sacrificed the victims for religious reasons due to his mental condition, which they claim could still be addressed with rehabilitation and treatment. So they were pushing for life in prison without parole rather than death. However, you know, with everything combined together, the judge decided to sentence him to death. So he is currently on death row right now in Texas, which is the current status. So as I was looking into this, right, to like for in preparation, I saw that 3 days ago there was a post on Instagram. It's a picture of him in the courtroom. There's a page called Humanizing Death Row, and they post like pictures of inmates, and there's like a message. Their address is also listed if they want to like receive correspondence from the outside. And so I don't know if he wrote this, but he writes, "Hello, my name is Jason Thornburg. I've been on death row since December 5th, 2024. I'm Native American of the Navajo tribe out of northern Arizona, and I'm looking for a pen pal who will be willing to be friends with me to help me fight back against loneliness, depression, and helplessness, which is experienced from being locked up in solitary confinement." And it goes on. There's information for e messages, and I guess he has a tablet. Um, he can also receive mail, so the address is there. And then there's also the physical address, like for visits. And so I was like, oh my goodness. See, it's right there. I was like, quit the, and it's 3 days ago. So yeah, that's how I found out he was Diné, because I was like, who is this guy? You know what I mean? Like I looked at him and I was like, looks familiar, eh? You know what I mean? Like you kind of can tell, But I was like, I wonder if he's Diné or not. So I looked it up because his name, like Thornburg, I never heard of a Thornburg on the res. But anyways, yeah, so I looked it up and that's where I found that. And I was like, oh my goodness. So if he did write that, then he is Diné. Um, so yeah, that's what I uncovered about this case. I don't know. What are your thoughts and what's going through your mind right now?
When you first mentioned like, I know sometimes like when domestic violence case comes up, there's always like
Mhm.
that. I don't know. Like I hear it in passing sometimes of like there's no evidence without a body, and so
Mhm.
sometimes like domestic violence just turns into murder and missing, because if they can't find a body, the person can't be convicted of domestic violence,
Mhm.
which is so dangerous in a lot of these cases. And the
Mhm.
fact, like, oh, we'll just drop the charges because we can't find the person you assaulted. It's like,
Mhm.
that's
Like red flag.
annoying. It's annoying.
Mhm.
It's frustrating. Um, and then I know I've heard of people communicating with people on death row. I didn't know there was an entire like page dedicated to being able to look up people on death row and become pen
Mhm.
pals with them.
Mhm.
Um, I don't even want to know why someone would. I'm sure there's like maybe like psychologists or people who write like papers or studies,
Mhm.
and I sort of understand that part, but the part of like just being a pen pal of someone to talk to, like,
Mhm.
how lonely do you have to be? Um, on the outside,
Well,
obviously
very
on the
lonely, right? I mean,
on the
people they go in young. Like he went in his 30s and he's in his 40s
not
now.
him. Like I understand the prisoners being lonely, but the people
Oh.
writing to them,
Oh
the people
yeah.
on the outside of the world, like how lonely are you that you have to find someone literally in prison who have no way of escaping or talking to other people to be the person you
Mhm.
connect with.
Well, I guess this is the tea section, but so back in the day when I was little, my uncle and aunt, they're very like into the church, right? And they're all about like they would hear people's testimony and it would be powerful how like, the Lord changed their lives. And I don't know if it was a program through the church, but we ended up going on this like prison tour through California. And so we went to Folsom. We went to like three prisons in California. And like it was wild because like we got a tour of the prison and then we like met some of the prisoners and then we like became pen pals with some of them. And this is what happens when you're raised in the church. Like, you know what I mean? You kind of get these life experiences that other people don't get. And that was one that I got. And so I got a lot of really cool art for a number of years. And I would just like write about my day because like we're asked to like, all right, write a letter and we'll send it out. And so it was facilitated by adults, but it was like carried out by the kids, me being one of them. And I can see you judging.
I'm not judging you, okay? I'm not judging you. It's
I'm
you
almost
were a
there.
child, okay? You just did what they asked you to do, but like
But but that's kind of like the thing that was good about it was it seeded humanity in me. You know what I mean? And it seeded this really clear privilege that we have as people who are not incarcerated. Because when you go in that system and you see what it's like and you see the limitations, and it wasn't like visiting Alcatraz, a prison that's closed down. You're going into a functioning high security prison, and the people who were in it, they weren't on death row, but they had done stuff, which is why they were there. But it was, yeah. And so there are people out there that might want to write, that might be curious, that might want to know. And so I think like that's why there are all these like avenues of communication now, where before I think it was a lot of isolation, where prisoners didn't have the right to text or go online or like check their Facebook every now and then, you know what I mean? Or even like work with someone like on some sort of like, I guess, a marketing team to be able to get their address out there for the public. But I mean, it's right here on Instagram. So I'm like, wow. So,
no, I like what you're talking about seems kind of innocent in a weird way of like, teaching kids how to write letters and communicate with people. But
mhm,
there's also the other side of like where there's people who want to marry or get into intimate relationships with people on death row and for serial
mhm,
killers. And there's like all the
yeah,
stuff with like Ted Bundy and Charles Manson on that level, like where people are obsessed
or
in an
even like the
unhealthy way. And it's just
yeah, I
weird.
remember.
Where like there's because my mind went to that, and you're like, oh, I was a child writing to a pen pal in prison. I'm like, oh, that's a lot.
I know. Well, I know. I've seen those Netflix documentaries too, where that happens. I mean, I don't want to judge anybody for how they choose to spend their time, but yeah, I mean, I was surprised though when I saw that. I was like, whoa. So, like we're digging and we're trying to find answers. And I think like going back to this case specifically, um, the family, they're still seeking answers. So I think like if somebody wanted to write and ask, they probably could. I mean, he did confess, but because there's no body, the investigation's a little bit halted because it said that he was indicted in 2022. The investigation's still open though. So I
Well,
mean, if
like,
somebody had the
my feeling is he confessed to the murder, but he won't tell the family where the body is. I feel like
hmm
that's a power he's holding on for himself.
hmm
And that shows
hmm
that he's not as sorry as maybe he's making himself out to be, or the
hmm
lawyers were. Because if he was sorry and remorseful, he would tell them where the body is so that they can have that closure. And I think for
hmm
Navajo specifically, being able to have the burial is something really
hmm
important so that the spirit
yes.
and the soul can move on and not become a
hmm
vengeful or hateful spirit in the world. And him
hmm
not telling them that is very telling on still his character, I think.
Yeah, and him being Diné, he knows that.
Mhm.
That he knows that a burial is very important, unless he thinks in his mind, I already buried her. You know what I mean? But
But
still.
yeah, it's still like not telling the family where she is.
hmm
Is and he
Yeah.
didn't even bury the other people. He burned them and
hmm
in pieces. That's still very, I don't know, emotional, especially to like the net people who are very specific on the way people need to be buried and,
hmm
returned to the earth.
Yeah, it goes against everything that is right and correct, and you know what I mean, as far as like culture is concerned. I get the sense that he didn't really care about culture or have any strong ties to it, just considering the nature of his crimes. But we don't know, I don't know who this person is. It's kind of freaky that he's around my age though. When I saw the name of Tanya, I actually got a little freaked out because I used to have a roommate named Tanya Begay. Of course, we know there's a billion Tanyas and like at least there's probably at least a few thousand Tanyas and a few thousand Begays, and you know what I mean. So I don't think it's her, but I looked at her and I was like, because my roommate probably would have been a little older, at least a at least 2 years older than Tanya was. But yeah, I was like, oh my god, like, and crazy too because it was in Flagstaff and she was my roommate. Because I was at one time renting an apartment with four of us, and there was a Tanya Begay in one of them. And I was just like, oh my god, that looks like her. I hope it's not her. And then I was like, it couldn't be her. She was too young. She would have at least been a year or two older. I'm thinking, but I don't know. It's really messed up. There's another person too that I went to church with back when I was 18, living in Flag, and the person with the same name was convicted of murder too. And I was like, what the heck? Like, is that him? Like, he was like a church guy, but then this guy seems like he was a church guy too. And I'm just like, whoa. Anyways, we're going off on a tangent. Um, but it's like wild. Anyways, this case it was really disturbing, like reading through everything. And that's the thing is like, this is us just sharing a story and pulling resources that are available like on the FBI website, on advocacy websites, on the news websites. I have some links from like Fox 12 did a few, I believe it's Fox 12 or Channel 12 in Texas. They did some coverage, 12news.com. The New York Times covered it. Oh, I wanted to share though. So some of the follow up of this case, um, it led to the strengthening of the Missing and Murdered Denied Relatives Initiative. Um, as we know, um, excuse me, Council Delegate Crotty, she's been a huge advocate, and she was reached out to by the news networks. And I wanted to share a little bit about what she had to say. So she mentioned the MMDR task force and how they're working to develop a framework for a proposed MMDR, the MMDR Data Institute, which I've spoken to. And I think I even talked about it on our first episode. But she was stating that she wrote, or she's quoted saying, "Our lives are not valued. We are not a disposable population of banished people." She says that there's a lack of equity in the coverage of missing and murdered Diné people. She's quoted saying, "We've heard from many families that they feel alone and have to do searches themselves due to a lack of resources." And this is true because I read that Tanya's family was actually looking for her for 2 years before authorities even got involved, which is crazy. And this is the burden that our people carry with them. Many times, the families of those who go missing and murdered, they're doing their best to find out what happened. They're conducting their own searches. They're going into their own investigations. And it's a huge burden because the resources infrastructure is not really there. And there is, like Council Delegate Crotty said, a lack of equity in the coverage of these cases. So the task force is being developed to create a database on underreported missing cases. She said, "As tribal leadership, we can see the glaring gaps in what the Federal Bureau of Investigation is not providing in terms of investigations. The FBI will investigate crimes considered a major crime. So if someone is missing and there's no suspected reason of foul play, the FBI will not get involved." So that was something that she was quoted saying, and it was attributed to her on the news. Representative Germain, Arizona State, she said that she was also in the story that I read, but it says Representative Germain leads a committee studying the underlying causes of missing and murdered Indigenous people. Quote, "In some parts of the state, there are crimes of opportunity. People going missing because we don't have cell service or broadband," said Arizona State Jennifer Germain. "Some parts of the state, it's tied to human trafficking, and in some parts of the state, it's domestic violence and sexual assault." Germain says the committee is working with law enforcement agencies to build cross-agency task forces to close the gap in inequity in communication. She introduced HB 2142, which will require agencies to reach out to federal partners once an adult has been missing for 30 days. She said, "People are going missing here in our state, in our local communities, and we need to find them." She says, she also mentioned Arizona State University's Violent Victimization Lab in the School of Criminology and Criminal Justice. And they did a study led by American Indian leaders across the state to develop strategies to address and minimize missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. The lab has found that Indigenous women are murdered at a rate of 10 times the national average. And then there's a link to the report, which I also pulled up. So the report, it's 105 pages long, but there's some really great data in here. And there's also some really great infographics. One thing that stood out to me where they do a breakdown of murdered Native American females by county and by location and by weapon. It's really detailed. And so for those of you who are seeking out information about this, ASU did an amazing study, and they have a number of different resources that are a little more up to date also. So going to their website and searching is definitely something you can do. And I'll see if I can include those links below also. So that's what I wanted to share with you all as a useful resource for those who are watching and who, care deeply about this issue, but also want to learn more.
So going back to the case of Tanya, you said that like the authorities or the FBI didn't tell their family for like 2 years. Like she's been missing for 2 years. She had that domestic violence case, and they're like, "Oh, she's missing. We're just gonna ignore the case with a person's name on it, and then not connect."
No, no, I wouldn't write it off like that. They knew she was missing, but they were looking for her. It's what it stated, that they were looking for her, and so the timeline is in 2014 she had filed this she filed a domestic violence report against her boyfriend, and the family knew that he had a history of violence. Um, and so that was something that happened, and it didn't go anywhere. She then disappeared in 2017, which is like 3 years later. And and I don't know if the legal process was just so slow that it took that long for it to actually get to a point where she could testify, but I wouldn't doubt it. Just knowing how slow the legal system is, it moves so slow sometimes, especially because other things get prioritized. And so some of these cases, I don't know how they rank them in severity, but I think sometimes some things they get pushed aside for things that might be more serious or whatever. I don't know. You know what I mean? I don't know. But anyways, that's not my area. But anyways, I do know that like that's what was stated in the reports. And then in 2022, it appears that they had acquired enough information to indict. So what happened was he confessed to the murder in 2021 after he had already been arrested and apprehended for the murder of 3 other people in Texas. So that means we have 18, 19, 20, 21, 4 years, a 4 year gap between when she actually went missing and to when he confessed to murdering her. So for 2 years of that, her family was looking for her. And I'm sure that at that point, the police got involved at some point in here. But for 2 years, her family were already looking for her. And then I'm sure there was like a search, probably notification, probably community, like, hey, someone's missing. But I mean, I don't remember seeing anything about it. Maybe others did, but apparently there were others like who were sharing information about her that were looking for her. In 2021, he admitted to it. And so, but he didn't share where she was or give details from what I could see about how he did it. But it sounds like it was from what I gleaned is like, as you kind of pointed out too, is there's a pattern of how he how he killed people and disposed of their bodies. And so people are, and because he said that they were human sacrifices, they were like religious sacrifices. So it's almost like a method that he uses. And so if she was dismembered, that means that, she could be in various parts of the land, or she could be like her body, maybe, I don't know. I don't know. It's so disgusting to think about. But you know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
we don't know where she's at or what happened to her
So
exactly.
would she have been like one of the first victims? And then it was the later victims that got him caught?
I believe so, because she was in 2017 when she went missing, and then the other 4 people were in 2021.
Is when they died.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So
I
she
was just
might have
trying to
been.
get like I wasn't sure if like he killed his like he did his thing first and then she was murdered, but it sounds like she was one of the first
She might
of
have
his
been, yeah.
victims.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't say I'm like really into serial killers, but I feel like I know
Mm-hmm.
like a couple of them, and this was just a case I don't think I've ever heard.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it might just be because of the nationalities of the victims and the perpetrator, the murderer. I don't know. It kind of drives more the point of this podcast of trying to highlight victims of a minority
Mm-hmm.
that's a minority of minorities. It's
Mm-hmm.
because yeah, like less than 1% of the entire population.
Mm-hmm. And it says a lot too about the resources that certain families have. So, like, Ella May Begay, she got a lot of coverage in the news because, people were actively reaching out to the media to share her story. And then there was another person whose name is slipping my mind, but there was a billboard outside of Loop, Arizona, and they were able to fund to have that up for years so that we could see her face and we could also see phone numbers
Mhm.
of how to contact people who were looking for her. And then Ashlyn Mike, there was a lot of visibility for her because it was, I think it was the shock of it all is kind of one of the bigger cases that really hit the news. And also because of Council Delegate Crotty, that was, it happened in her region, and she used her platform to get the story out there and to actually do something about it, you know, enact some change for the good of the nation and for the people who were not just directly involved, but everyone in the years to come. So for that reason, I think that's why, like, this case seems to be a little bit under the surface. And I remember when we were seeking out cases, we were trying to find those that were familiar to us. And so I did a search of MMIW, MMIG, MMDR cases that were specific to the Navajo Nation, and that's how I found Tanya Begay's name. But it wasn't one that I was already aware of. All the others I've been aware of, just because, you know, like your connection to the last case, Ashlyn, and then LMA.
Hmm.
Those are very visible. So yeah,
And then I guess a heads up, our next case is LMNK.
yeah. Like for me, like I really feel for the families, both sides. You know, like both being Diné, both being connected. Like to have something like this happen, it just ripple effects. You know, through like there's a ripple effect that hits everybody, and so I guess just extending some empathy to those individuals who are still suffering from this. You know, it's like the sentencing, the death sentencing, that was like just a few months ago. So it's still very recent and still very raw. So
Hmm.
I just want to like send that out, and hopefully people who watch this who know these individuals will also extend that empathy, and instead of being like, I don't know how we say, all somehow, like, you know, like be kind, you know what I mean? Like be kind to these people because they're going through a lot.
For sure. Like again, I hope you guys are appreciating these episodes. And we'll have one more for this, I guess, season, and then see how well they do, and pick it back up again in a couple of months. But yeah, thanks for watching. We appreciate everyone who's commenting and watching the videos,
Mhm.
um, and yeah, I guess don't forget to like, share,
Okay.
subscribe. It's hard to say
Oh
that on
God,
these
that's so
episodes.
rugged. I know. Don't like it, don't share, and don't subscribe. Go give your family a hug right now, geez.
But like, doing those show us you appreciate these episodes, and it gives us the motivation to keep doing them, because they are
Mhm,
emotionally taxing and difficult
mhm,
to process, and then everything. But it's us putting our emotions into this, and hopefully being able to get the traction it needs for people to see and be able to hear, like make a family member and show that, you know, they're not forgotten. And then we are hoping that, you know, Tanya is found and being able to be laid to rest peacefully with her
mhm,
family in accordance to their practices.
mhm. I think that'd be kind
Or
of
if there's
cool.
like any other people who want to talk about their own cases with like family members of their own things that they want to come onto this show and use our audience and our small little, you know, influence that we
Mhm,
have, and you would like to come up and share your own story, that's, we're welcome to
mhm,
that, you know, if you want to be able
mhm,
to do that. um,
mhm.
I'm just putting that out
Yeah,
there.
absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so I think that's it. Otherwise, I'm going to go off on another tangent. I have so many things on in my head right now, but I'm like, no, we need to stop. So yeah, we're coming up on time. So
Yeah, all right, thanks everyone for watching, and we appreciate you. And if you appreciate these videos, like, share, subscribe, comment anything you feel like is relevant to the episode or the topics that we've discussed today. Okay, go net.
we're going to take care of each other.